Hello, Steba Studios here, and I'm making my very first art video, I guess you can say. This is my current process in filling my sketchbook. And I didn't really have an idea when I started making this video. I just kind of drew and kind of see what happens is usually how it goes. So I ended up drawing this woman who looks a bit unsettled, and I guess it's kind of how I feel, a bit nervous, a bit uneasy, and expressing that in art is a very nice and healthy way to explore and express feelings. So right now I'm just sketching out and just drawing whatever comes to mind, and this is what I end up doing. I'm just using my trusted Pilot Super Grip pen, and I guess the graphite is an HB. It's usually what they are. So I'm speeding up the process, just so this video won't be too long. I usually draw quite fast, but it's still kind of boring to watch it in real time, I guess. I did erase the lower part because I wasn't really happy with it. It's usually where I do struggle. This is just a person standing upright, and I am lifting some of the graphite with my trusted kneaded eraser to adjust some of the anatomy. And after that I went back to the lower body, and it turned out much better. I do lift the page, which I do recommend doing if you work on a flat surface, just to make sure the proportions are right, because usually when I draw it gets elongated and it's really annoying when you look at it from above instead of from slightly underneath. I did not quite like the skirt in the beginning, but I kind of managed to make it better. Just fixing up some of the detail to make sure where I want the lines to be when I start inking. I'm using the Tombow Mono Zero eraser. It's very thin, so I can get the smaller detail erased. Now to inking. So in the beginning, I'm just gonna kind of show you how I do my inking. So I'm using my Pigma Micron, which are my favorites. So what I do is I just follow the line, and then I go back and make certain points of the line thicker and thinner to make the illusion of a brush pen stroke. That is the best way I can describe it, but it's how I do my line art, and I'm very happy with how it turns out. And it's an interesting and fun process sometimes. Sometimes I will finish the line work just with straight lines and follow in with the thick and thinner ones afterwards. And sometimes I do like I do now. I kind of go back and forth on the same line until I'm happy and move forward to the next one. For this one, I think I only used the 1.0 pen, even for the thinner lines in the hair. You just flick it to make the strands of hair. Now I'm speeding up so you won't be here for too long. The good thing about this method is that if you mess up, you can go back and make the thicker part kind of cover up the mistake, and it saves you sometimes. This is something I just recently started doing. I discovered this or developed this way of doing line work when I work in real life instead of digital after I participated in Inktober last year, which was my first Inktober. And one of the first days I just thought my lines looked so flat and the artwork looked so, I don't know, flat and boring and undramatic compared to how it looks digitally. And that's how I kind of discovered that that's because digitally I use a brush pen, and in real life I have these kind of Fineliners that has the same thickness no matter how hard you press on the paper. So I started making the illusion of a brush pen because turns out I'm not very good at using brush pens in real life. But I've tried. So this is how I prefer to use it, because the Fineliner gives me a lot of control compared to a brush pen. And I'm sure if I practice, I will get the same amount of control in a brush pen. But so far, this is how I enjoy making my line art. What I really enjoy about these Fineliners is that you can use them for a lot of different projects. For example, I use these when I work with watercolor because they're waterproof. I use them with markers. Sometimes, as you will see in these videos, they do actually smudge, so you have to be careful and be more patient waiting for it to dry. And where you have smaller details where a lot more markers, like the eyelashes where I messed up, that's where it tends to smudge. They are affordable and they come in many different sizes. So yeah, I'm a big fan of these Fineliners. And the camera did die twice. Well, it didn't die, it stopped recording, so good thing I did notice it without working too far. As you can see, I turn my sketchbook to be able to make steady lines. I do switch it up more usually, but when I did this recording I didn't want to move around the sketchbook too much. That would be quite annoying. But when I do certain lines at the end of the page or where I can't rest my hand, I do flip the sketchbook to a point where I can comfortably do it. Now, eyelashes I've never been very good at doing. I'm still not very good at it. I should have switched to the 0.05 pen, but I didn't. It did work out fine anyway, but I don't know. I do struggle with it. This is a manga drawing, kind of my natural, normal style of drawing. So I can make the eyelashes more cartoonish. That does save me. Now the fine lining is finally finished. I will take my trusted kneaded eraser and remove the graphite to get the clean lines. It's so satisfying. It does make the table shake. So I try to do it when my fiance isn't playing video games. And I do take a scrap of paper and put it underneath, just in case the markers bleed through. Now this is, I think, 160 grams paper, but sometimes they do bleed through anyway when I go over the same spot over and over. So I'm starting with the blush usually, where I want it to be a more blushy. And this is where I messed up. You can see at the eye area it did smudge, but you know, shit happens, you just have to keep on going. So there are a couple of ways to do markers, alcohol-based markers that is, and this time I am working dark to light. Sometimes I do put the base color first and then work light to dark. It doesn't really matter that much, but it's just different ways of doing it. And I do tend to go over multiple times, but this time I only went once with the skin tones. So again, you can go the darkest to the lightest as I do in this video, or you can put the base color first and then work light to dark or dark to light. Just know, markers, just like watercolors, cannot really lift the colors as paint can, let's say. You can't go lighter once you've put down a dark color. Copics do kind of melt into each other, but only to a certain extent. Just like watercolor, you can lift some of it by wetting the area and dabbing it with a paper towel. But yeah, it's you learn the hard way usually. So when I do markers, when you are doing shadows, you want a couple pens in order to do a gradient. I would say minimum 3. If it's a smaller area, that's fine. But if you have 4 or 5, that's even better. But it can be quite difficult to find the same saturation or hue to the marker. As you can see in this part, when I'm doing the skirt, the lightest color is B for blue. I think it was B00, but it appeared to be a blue-green compared to the other blues I'm using, and I was so frustrated because I tested them before on the scrap paper, which is underneath, and it did not show up as green as it did on the final work. So I picked the next lightest blue and tried to go over it again to try to save it, but it was still, you could see it was kind of a greenish blue, and I was quite frustrated, but that's how it goes, you know. The thing about being an artist or just anything where confidence comes into play is you trust, it's not that you don't make mistakes, it's that you trust your ability to work with the mistakes. So like here I take the lightest blue, which I swatched beforehand, but it did, as you can see, kind of make it greener. So I had to kind of trust my skills and know that if I put on another one, the Copics will kind of melt and make it make it a bit more blue, like the one I'm really bad at explaining, but yeah. You can see me struggle, very confused and why it turned out so green. But yeah, I put on the next lightest one I had and made it a little better. In the end, these are the kind of things you as the artist notice a lot more than people who are just watching the finished product. When you watch the process, you do tend to notice a lot more. So it's easy to be very critical and hard on your work. But yeah, you're not alone, we all do this. As soon as you make something, it's very personal. I remember my mom used to say that our artworks are like our babies. We made them, they're part of us, they came from us. And there's always a little part of the artist in the artwork. So when people criticize it or whatever, yeah, you tend to get a bit defensive, but taking criticism is very important. So for the hair, I wanted her to have quite a light hair. However, making blondes can be a bit tricky with markers, because you can see I used a lot of yellow, orange, and it doesn't look very natural. Of course, this is just like a manga drawing, so, but if I move towards a more natural blonde, it tends to melt into the skin colors too much. So yeah, it's hard to make, because what is dark yellow? It's like orange and then brown. It's just me ranting about colors. So now I'm doing something I quite enjoy doing nowadays, which is making a block of color behind the subject. In this one I decided to do a circle, and it kind of helps balance the piece out a bit. It puts her into frame more, because I'm making it on the top half of her body, because I made it a bit more to the right, because I did draw her a bit too much to the left, so you kind of balance out the piece, and I just think it looks nice. So I do squares, so rectangles and circles, and I'm using a Promarker to fill it in, because Promarkers are less expensive, so I don't want to waste my Copics on big areas with flat color. And now we're going to the funnest part, which is highlights. So this is the last part of my art process, which is usually the most fun. And this is what makes the artwork pop. I did use the Gellyroll, which I'm not a fan of, to be honest, but I decided to give it another chance. But as you will see, I will turn back to my trusted Posca pens instead, because it does smudge and it's not that opaque, and I just struggle with it. I don't know. I don't like the Gellyrolls. I prefer Posca because they are, sure, they can leak and drop and mess up, so I always swatch it beforehand and shake it up real good. But here's where it got bad and I rage quit and went back to Posca. I gave you a chance, Gellyroll. I don't know why people like you so much. You see, it just smudges. What? Now I did have to wait for the Posca to dry so I can make another layer where it smudged from the Gellyroll. But sometimes I make the outline like a black thick line, like I usually do digitally. But now I also like to make a white outline, just like I do with the rest of the drawing, and make her pop even more, especially from the circle I made behind her. Now if you mess up, don't worry, you can always go back with your Fineliner to draw where the white kind of overlaid the black. So you can always go back and fix. You can go back and forth as many times you want, I think. And then I just sign it and she is done. Here she is. My little unsettled, scared, nervous girl. I hope she's doing better soon. So I hope you enjoyed this process with me, and happy painting. Bye bye.